Hello there, welcome to another one of our simple instructions videos where we look to move you away from the ready meal world and add a few simple dishes to your repertoire, put together a few staples so you can pass yourself off as a decent cook. What we're going to do today is lasagne. Now lasagne, it's basically spag bol with a bit of additional faff. But again, you know, we're going to take you through the steps of making a spag bol if that's something that you need help with. Most people will be able to do is put a spag bol together. It's very, very rare that you find two people who do the spag bol differently, the same. I know my sister does a reasonable spag bol, very, very different to how I put it together. And there's so many different ways of doing it. And ingredients that you might add, and I will mention those through the course of the video about what you might want to add at different times. I'm going to do it how I generally do it, not how I would do it if I was, say, making it for a load of children who might want it to be slightly sweeter. So, very simple start. We've got an onion and we've got some garlic. I've got about 4 cloves of pretty decent sized garlic here. I normally put a little bit more in, but my shop from the supermarket's not arriving until tomorrow morning. This is what I've got left, so that's what we're going to use. And similar, if you've seen the curry video, and get the stick blender out and make this all smooth rather than finely chopping it. One of the things that you could do is finely chop it, but what we're going to do is we're going to get the onion, we're going to stick that in there, we're going to peel the garlic, we're going to stick that in the stick blender, and the other thing that we're going to put in there is some fennel seeds. Italian cooking does use a lot of fennel, and while you should really use fresh fennel, it's not always the easiest to get a hold of, especially if you're concentrating on a supermarket shop. You don't have access to markets or even the time to go to markets. How many people do actually have that time nowadays? So we're going to put some fennel seeds in there. Just a few, just to add. Fennel has a little bit of a sort of an aniseedy flavour, which I'm not a massive fan of when it's very strong, but used in moderation can really bring out the flavour of other things. Okay, so I've just roughly chopped the onion that's in quarters, and just stuck the garlic cloves in there peeled, and I'm going to put in, it's probably, if you're into measurements, that's probably about a teaspoonful of fennel seeds. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to add a little bit of oil to that. Oil of your choice. I'm not going to go back through all that sort of thing again. And just blitz that up until it's nice and smooth. One thing that I should have mentioned at the start of the video is that a lasagna has 3 cooking elements. There's the making of the bolognese sauce, which is what we're doing first. There's the making of a bechamel or white sauce, and there is the baking of the lasagna. So I tend to do it, I'll get the sauce, this bolognese sauce going, then I'll start with the bechamel, and then obviously, you know, you can't do the last bit without doing the first 2 bits. Okay, so we've moved across to the hob, and we've got that. I've probably got that a little bit hot, to be honest. I want to cook that quite relatively gently because it's got garlic in there as well as onion, and you don't want the garlic to burn. You'll notice that I am doing the onion first before I put any meat in here. And that's because onions take longer to cook than beef, and minced beef, and therefore you put the thing that's going to take the longest to cook in first. You don't want to overcook the beef, dry it out. This is probably where I should belatedly ask if you are enjoying these videos to like the video, share the video and subscribe. Share some of your attempts at these recipes in the comments. I'm sure I've offended, and I'm about to offend, a lot of people with the way I've been doing the cooking, so by all means have a rant at that as well, well within your rights. So what we're doing now is I'm adding a little bit of tomato puree. I'm going to add a little bit more, and some dried oregano, and I'm putting in a reasonably generous amount. That's probably a tablespoonful if you go into your quantities. I quite like oregano. In fact, I'm going to put a little bit more in, but you could also at this stage use dried thyme as well. The dried herbs, dried oregano and thyme, especially dried oregano. Fresh oregano is a very delicate flavour. Dried oregano is much, much stronger. And the smell of the oregano is already filling the room in there now. So I'm just going to put a little bit more tomato puree in. Again, I put the tomato puree in at this stage because the way I look at it is that it's a concentrate and it needs to be cooked out. Well, there's plenty of people stick it in when they put in the tomatoes later on and have perfectly fine results. So just stir that in and let it cook. Okay, so this has been cooking for about 5 minutes now, and it's got that lovely red colour from the tomato puree, and the smell of garlic and oregano is filling the kitchen, which is wonderful stuff. And now it's time to add the beef. So what I have here is, and I don't like the way they do it nowadays, is this sort of semi-vacuum packed supermarket minced beef. And it comes out in a slab like this, and it's such a pain to pull apart. Now this is where I'm going to advocate that you get your beef and mince from your local butcher. But a lot of people, there's not as many butchers around as there used to be. A lot of people don't have access to them, and it's an extra journey. So the reason for these videos is to make sort of cooking more accessible, and what is most accessible is supermarket beef. But look, you've got to pull it apart. It comes into lumps, and it's just adds additional work for yourself. But put about half of it in there, give it a stir, leave it for a minute or two, and then add the rest. But do try as much as you can to pull it apart at this stage. Otherwise you're just going to have to mash it apart as you cook. Okay, so I've added the rest of the beef, and as you can see, it's sort of semi-cooked there. It's just cooking away. Now at this point I'm going to add a good mittful of coarse salt. So about that much, if you see there. That's again about a teaspoon. And a few twists of black pepper. I'll have the black pepper pot in the thingy. Again, wear appropriate footwear in the kitchen and not flip-flops. But a good twist of black pepper there. Now you can, obviously, there's a couple of things you can do, either to beef this sort of thing out, if you excuse the pun, or vegetarian alternatives. So something like grated carrot and grated eggplant, aubergine. You can make a reasonable attempt at this sort of thing with, or adding grated carrot, and it has to be finely grated carrot, to the mix now. Now that, one, increases the quantity, and two, gets a few vitamins into your children if you've got ones that are a bit suspicious of vegetables like mine. One thing you've got to watch with that is it does make your spaghetti bolognese, your lasagna, whatever you're making with this bolognese, does make it very sweet. It's not for my palate, and that's why I'm not doing it. But if you're making this for, I did a children's party not so long ago when we just did a bulk spaghetti bolognese for all the kids, and there was a load of carrots went into that, and it went down a treat. I personally thought it was inedible, but you've got to cook for your audience, I suppose. So yeah, if you give that stir. So if you see on the bottom of the pan there, it's been cooking, and you can see how quickly that this mince cooks, which is why I don't put it in first. I put the onions in first and let them get away before we put the beef in. Now, you don't have to have everything fully cooked through, because it's going to cook as it when you put the sauce in as well. So you've got most of the meat brown there. One thing I am going to do now is I'm going to put in this is a beef stock cube, which crumbles down. So I'm just going to give that a good squeeze and crumble that in. And that just quite obviously gives it a little bit more of a beefy flavour. Again, if you're cooking this for children, you might want to skip that step if the stronger taste is going to put them off a little bit. So yeah, just stir that in. And then we're going to add our liquid. Just get that a little bit there. And the other thing to notice, if you see what I mean, yeah, there's a bit. With these sort of the supermarket vacuum packed things, you get these clumps, and just knock them apart like that. Every time you see one, just take a bit of frustration out on it like that. Okay, so we're ready for our liquid now, and first thing I'm gonna add a little bit of port. Now this is where people start getting upset. Main reason for me using port, one, it's very much more concentrated than red wine, so you don't have to use as much. And two, I don't like port, therefore later on or while I'm cooking, I won't be tempted to drink the bottle of red wine. And then I'm going to increase the heat a little bit and get that to boil, because what you want to do is get the alcohol to burn off, and you'll be able to tell that when it starts to smell much more of alcohol. And while you're doing that, you can just sort of knock out a few more of those lumps there. So that's had a couple of minutes to get the alcohol burned off. It's bubbling away quite hard. And we're going to add in the tomatoes. All that is a tin of chopped tomatoes and a bit of water. The reason why I blitzed it up, if you've watched the curry video again, my son doesn't like bits, therefore the fewer bits that we have in his food, the more likely he is to eat it. So instead of having chopped tomatoes, I blitz up the tomatoes. So give that a stir in, and that's quite a liquid mixture now. Now the other things that I'm going to add to the mix now, and again this is probably going to offend some people who find they were more protective of traditional recipes, but I don't really care about that, to be honest. Like we said before, we're all about flavours. I'm going to add a dash of Worcestershire sauce, or Worcester sauce, add a little bit of acidity to it, and then I'm going to add a good squeeze of brown sauce. Now, and that's brown sauce, not barbecue sauce. And the reasons for this is, the Worcester sauce, I could use a little bit of vinegar, just to add a little bit of acidity to it, and then to even out the acidity of the tomatoes and the vinegar. That's what the brown sauce is for. A lot of recipes will say add some sugar. Of course you can do that, but the brown sauce is absolutely stacked full of sugar. So essentially you're adding a little bit of sugar and a little bit of tang just for a bit more of a unique flavour. Now, if I'm not making this how your Italian mother made it, by all means have a rant about it in the comments below. Then all you're going to do is just let that come to the boil, turn it down and simmer it. But that is your spaghetti, that's your bolognese sauce. So you can make this ahead of time, you can freeze this. If you realise that you're running out of time to make a lasagna, you can just go, sod it, I'm not going to make a lasagna, we're just going to have spag bol. There's my bolognese sauce, job done. Again, going back to what else you can do with this, you could chop some mushrooms into that, that's perfectly fine. I would quite enjoy that, but there's plenty of people who wouldn't. And like I said, this is a bit too liquid, really. You need it to be, lasagna sauce should be slightly more liquid than a bolognese sauce for just having with spaghetti, because you want the dry lasagna sheets to soak that liquid in. But this is a little bit too liquid, so you just want to leave this with the lid off, simmering away, just get a little bit of that liquid off. And next we're going to make the bechamel sauce. Okay, so the bolognese sauce is bubbling away in the background there. And now we're going to make the white sauce, or the bechamel sauce. To make a true bechamel sauce, what you really should be doing is getting an onion, slicing it in half, and putting some garlic cloves in there, putting in a pan with the milk, and then putting that on the hob and letting that poach together while you warm it for about half an hour. Which is just a level of additional faff that I just do not have time for, can't be bothered with. So we're just going to make standard white sauce with milk, butter and flour. Now I've got my scales out here because I'm not very good at doing this sort of thing by eye, but if you're a legend like my mother who can put together Yorkshire pudding mix by eye, then knock yourself out. What we have in here is 50 grams of butter and 50 grams of plain flour. Now, standard rule of thumb for this is 1 to 1 to 10. So I want 500 mils. I know this from making lasagna. I know this from the size of the dish that I make the lasagna in. That's how much I'm going to need. I'll probably have a little bit left over at the end. So I've got 50 grams of butter, salted, unsalted, doesn't matter. 50 grams of plain flour, that does matter. And I've got 500 mils of milk. And all we're going to do is we're going to put this onto the hob on a low heat and melt the butter. And as the butter melts, it's going to combine with the flour into a paste, which will help the milk thicken as it boils. Okay, so we're back across at the hob. I've got my bolognese sauce bubbling away here, which you can possibly hear. It's turned down a little bit. And we've got our saucepan for the white sauce bechamel sauce in the middle here. Only reason for that is just so that it's easier for me to shoot with the camera rather than choice of rings. I'd probably say this is where you should be putting the oven on as well. So I've got my oven turned on to 180 degrees C. If you're watching this in America, say, and you're wondering what that is in Fahrenheit, I don't know. Download an app or something. There's got to be that sort of thing available. So what we've got here is you can see the butter is starting to melt, and just gradually work the flour and butter together. And now you must do this at the very start, because if you try and be clever and go, oh, I'll just chuck the flour in to thicken the milk at the end, that's not going to work. The flour's just gonna go into lumps. So most of the flour is cooked in there now, and what we need to do is gradually add the milk. Now, what I'm doing, I'm using two different implements. I've got my spatula at the moment, and that's to stop everything getting into the corner of the pan. So what you don't want to do is end up with all your roux stuck in the bottom of the pan, your milk bubbling away on top of it. You need to incorporate it. So we've got our milk here. I'm just going to add it gradually. So add a little bit to begin with. Just stir it in. As you can see, it's getting thick straight away. But all you're trying to do here is not to let any lumps form, and not to let anything get stuck to the pan. And once you've got to a point where it's nice and smooth like it is there, you can see there's no lumps forming in that. Pour a bit more in. Pour the lot in. And then take a whisk. This is a silicone whisk, because it does have silicone on the bottom, as of my pans, and give it a good stir. You will be able to see little lumps in amongst it all, but if you give it a good stir like that, you can't see many more lumps. And then just go one scoot around the corner of the pan again, and that's you done with your spatula. And then you just want to bring this to the boil. So you will need to stir this periodically to stop any lumps forming in the bottom of the pan. And as it comes to the boil, it starts to accelerate quite quickly. Now you can start to see, I don't know whether you can see that, but it's starting to leave a trail behind where the whisk has gone through. And that says that the sauce is beginning to thicken. Now while this has been going on, I've grated some cheese. Again, block your ears if you're into traditional Italian recipes. There's nothing wrong with using cheddar. So that's what I've used. I've just grated some cheddar. And again, it's difficult to say the amount. What you need is enough to cover the top of your lasagna. So depending on the size of the dish that you're going to cook your lasagna in, that depends on how much cheese you're going to need. Okay, so this is the part that you're probably not going to be able to do this without making a mess of your hob top. I don't think I've ever managed it. And again, I might be controversial here, but there's probably different ways that people layer their lasagna. A bit like, you know, when you have a cream tea and whether you've got your scone and then whether you put your jam or your cream on first. The correct answer to that is obviously put your cream on first. And if you think any different, then we can't be friends anymore. So what I do is I will put, first of all, a thin layer of the bolognese sauce in the bottom of the bowl. Just enough to cover the bottom of the bowl, smooth it down with the back of the spoon. And then we're going to lay some lasagna on top. Do not be tempted to layer the lasagna down double. Something like that is absolutely fine, but putting 2 layers down like this is basically what's going to happen is is it ain't gonna cook all the way through, and you're gonna end up with sort of al dente lasagna, which is what nobody wants really. So do that. So first bolognese first, then lasagna sheets. Then you say, it's getting really thick, so give it a good stir to unthicken it. See, I'm blocking that with my arm, shows my lack of professionalism. And just pour a little bit on like that. This is where you're making a mess because you slatter this all over the place. Just cover your lasagna down like that. Will do. And then put another layer of the bolognese, get that spatula out of the way. Like I say, we're not about presentation, we're about flavours on this channel. That's all that matters. There we are. And then we're going to sprinkle some cheese on top. So here we've got our grated cheese. There we go. There we are. Look at that. Maybe want a little bit more in the corners there. But again, it's not an exact science. And get that in the oven. Like I said before, the oven is currently heating at 180 degrees, and we want that in the oven. It's going to be a minimum of 45 minutes. Another good thing to do, I should be okay. I've done this plenty of times, so I know the volume of me of my dish. But if you've got this, if you've made it and it's coming quite close to the top, stick another tray underneath to catch any drips or overflow from this, because it's much easier to clean a tray than it is to clean an oven. I absolutely despise cleaning ovens. It's one of the things that I would happily pay somebody to do for me. Okay, so we're 45 minutes in. Let's have a look in this oven. Step back from the oven as you open it, don't get hit in the face by all the warm air rushing out. Let's have a look. Right, that doesn't look three bad. Needs a little bit longer. You can see it's just starting to crust up a bit there, but this is still a little bit soft. And we've got quite lucky. You've got to be careful. You put too much cheese on, you're going to end up with it being very oily. Something I didn't mention earlier as well with the mince. I used 5% beef mince. If you use... There's a school of thought, which is very, very true in my opinion, that if you want meat to taste like something, it's got to have some fat on it. But if you're using 20% mince, 20% fat mince in anything really, you're going to end up with a lot of fat that you're going to have to strain off somehow. So I think I've got this just about bang on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the temperature in the oven by another 20 degrees. I'm going to stick that in for another 10 minutes. Okay, so 10 minutes later, we'll have another look. Yeah, this looks much better. Look at that. Oh, sensational stuff. So that is our lasagna. Now you want to, obviously this is bubbling away, you can see there. You want to let this out to rest for a good 20 minutes before it's ready to eat. You just need to let everything settle. It's obviously extremely hot right now. So yeah, there you go. Have a go at this. Share your experiences and some photos in the comments below. Like, share and subscribe and all of that shebang. And have a lovely day.